Hello out there, everyone. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us today. This is the Musical QuaranStream with Glen and Bree. I am Glen.
Hey, Bree.
And Bristol is connected, I see, in our chat room. So nice to see you guys there. Sorry we were not here on Wednesday, but we are back again and ready to go.
Yeah, it's not anything that I feel like is a big secret or surprise or anything, but my health has not been great. I've talked about it a lot, and I had to be hooked up to a monitor for 24 hours. And while I think we probably could have done a show on Wednesday, it didn't look very nice on camera. It looked a little scarier than what it was, and so we just kind of decided it's probably better to keep some things personal and private.
Yes. So, for those of you who are not familiar with the show, I'm pretty sure everyone in our chat room is familiar with the show.
But in case you come along on this on YouTube or something.
Or anything else, yeah. Basically, what the Musical QuaranStream is, we started out back in March, basically being like, we're in shelter-in-place order sort of thing, so let's get on the web 2 times a week and let's discuss musical theater.
Let's entertain the folks.
Yes. And we've done a lot of different things. We tried summarizing musicals, seeing if we could summarize musicals. It had been a long time since we had seen.
And we've been in and tried to guess some things, and we still have some ads in the pipeline. I keep getting on him to keep producing our ads. I know that people really enjoy them, and I'd love to see some more posted.
Yes.
But hopefully those will come along in August.
Mm-hmm. And right now, for a while now, we've been basically pitching our ideas for shows.
Yeah, just things that we think would make good pieces of theater. I think that, let's just be very honest about this. The industry is in a bit of a tailspin, whether it's movies, theater. A lot of people are having a lot of hard times. So I feel like kind of the best place that we can kind of retreat into is our imaginations and have a lot of strength and power related to our creativity and what we can kind of dream will be possible. Although you set us up with a good show that we watched about... it sounded much better. It sounded like the dream of technology and theater combined in a really interesting and positive way. And then it was a little wah-wah.
Yeah. So we subscribe to HBO Max. Yes, we are the one who subscribes to HBO Max. Apparently everybody else is like, I have no idea what's going on with this thing. And we're the ones who are like, sure, we'll pay $11.99 a month for that.
I don't know. I like it, a lot of the stuff on it. I feel like it has a lot of potential. I mean, we haven't watched TV in a long time. We haven't paid for cable in like a decade, so...
Yeah, but we enjoy it. It's not like we don't enjoy it or anything. But generally speaking, it's been the streaming service that you look online and people are still wondering what's going on with it.
Well, I feel like everybody is... expecting like Netflix is the de rigueur of online streaming, and so I think a lot of people anticipated that this would be a great way to fund production companies, and of course with COVID, like that's really not gonna happen. So I feel like it's perfectly fine for places like Amazon and places like HBO, where hey, if you can't find your big giant TV movie collection because it's in storage, that can be resources that you can go and you can use. So I think everybody's trying to be like Netflix instead of being their own thing. And I think that that's what's making it very problematic. And people are trying to say like, well, what's the value if HBO is not going to produce all this original content, or if they're not going to do like Netflix? And I feel like that's kind of a bit of a mistake.
Yeah. Well, and I think right now HBO Max is... we're getting off track and talking about what HBO Max is as opposed to...
what my lead-up was.
Yes. But just real quick, I think that the thing that's going on with HBO Max that I see is, like you say, they're trying really hard to sort of be like Netflix, to be like, oh, let's produce original content and everything like that. And it's like, but you are HBO and Warner Brothers. You already have... around about 100 years of content that you guys have produced between those two companies, let alone all of the other companies that you've absorbed along the way.
Well, and they could be even better than Disney, because Disney is not releasing all of their movies.
Yeah,
think of how many Warner Brothers things they could release in.
Yeah,
we would all be like,
you know, So I think people right now don't know what to make about HBO Max because HBO Max doesn't know if it should be doing a Netflix, hey, we're the future, we're producing all this original material, or if they should be, we have a really deep back catalog. Hey, everybody, look at all of the great Warner Brothers movies you can watch. But what we're talking about specifically on HBO Max that Bree led us up into and then I distracted us.
Was Craftopia. No, I'm just
No.
kidding. But that's still really good.
That is a good show, though. If you haven't watched that, I see Bristol, it looks like you're saying you subscribe to HBO Max too. If you haven't watched Craftopia, you should watch Craftopia. It's a lot of fun.
It's little kids doing arts and crafts.
Yeah, it's fun. But it is... they have a documentary in their documentary section that's only about an hour long. It's like an hour and 8 minutes. And it is, can a computer create a hit musical?
And I said yes.
Yes. It's like, and honestly, it was like, there are lots of things out there that computers could be really useful for creating a hit musical and everything. But it became apparent to both of us very quickly in this that the entire thing had been sort of structured to ultimately bring us back to the idea of, oh no, you still need the human element.
Yeah, that was kind of like my call in the beginning. As I was like, they're going to say, well, the computer has no soul, and so therefore you really need people to make things for people. But it just disappointed me so much. Like, I have worked in artificial intelligence and learning systems for a long time, and so to see how there was a potential possibility to teach a computer, like, I think we talked about, like, there would be a couple different things. Like, here is the style of musical, here's a drama, here's a comedy, here's a romance, something like that. Or even teach a computer, hey, can you produce an Andrew Lloyd Webber or an Alan Menken or something like that. But this really was, like you see on Facebook, a script generator. We made this computer watch 500 hours of Golden Girls and now it wrote a script.
Yes.
So it's kind of like that. It was also like they kind of popped in a bunch of different, I guess, characters or roles or situations and then made them spit out plots. But like almost every choice was like a human choice.
Yeah.
Like they did an experiment with the cast during rehearsal where it's like, well, if you didn't have humans, this is the song you would have ended up with. And I'm like, it just, to me, it felt like beating up a child. Like, you're an adult. Like, this is just a baby learning system. Like, I thought it would have been so cool as if they taught a computer kind of all of the tropes and parts about musicals and then tried to see if it could make effective decision making. Like, focus more on the AI portion of the computer being a composing partner than sitting there saying, well, we had all this generated content and we interpreted it. Because I was like, well, how is that any different than going on Wikipedia and saying, oh yeah, I remember the crash of the stock market. I'm going to go ahead and write a musical about that.
And that's a thing that we discussed where it's even in the documentary, you can see a glimmer of that sort of thing being done. That, what is it, 3/4 of the way through the process?
Yeah, almost over. Like they're almost done.
They brought in a software developer from France.
He's also a jazz musician, so he composes his own work, but also programs computers.
Yeah, and he has programmed a computer to basically be a collaborator in terms of instrumentation. That where they had already been working with the computer composing things and then having a human being look at it and be like, well, I don't like the way that it composed this, so I'm going to change this, this, and this. And he had a piece of software there where it's like, okay, so he uploaded the music. It created the music that we're working with. And then I'm able to go through and say to the computer, I don't like these 8 bars of the song that you wrote. And the computer wipes it out and then says, okay, what if I replaced it with these 8 bars?
And it's like algorithmically based. So it's like, here's the most common next 8 bars I think humans will like.
Yeah.
And then as you keep erasing and keep erasing, it gets more discordant. There's a lot more kind of wrong notes. But like the computer's really trying to take an educated guess at what would be this music.
Yeah, and he said something that I liked a lot. He had one line that I really liked a lot, which is he was showing them how it works about, you select these bars and you say, I don't like these. The computer replaces it with something new and sees how you like that. And he said, "You break, the system repairs."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, that's the exact opposite of how they've been handling this the entire documentary. Is they've been looking at it as, well, the system broke this, and now it's up to us as human beings to repair it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and he's really got an idea there of how the computer can be a creative collaborator with you. Is you're the one who can look at what the computer did and say, sorry, this, and this I don't like, so I just broke your song. And then the system goes, oh, well, how do I repair that then?
Well, I just really hated it because it felt from the very beginning very gimmicky. Like they were going to do whatever the hell they wanted to do anyway, and then they just kind of used it as a gimmick. I don't think they really used anything effectively. I don't think that they really gave it an effort, because I said, one of the things that I think that could be a great piece of potential on this is if you train a computer to do these things, you can probably get Broadway musicals up, in 1 to 3 years versus 7 to 10 years. And I think that helps keep people employed. I think it helps people from going through, kind of the garbage sorting phase of maybe the first 3 months is just doing the research and everything. If that's all in the computer, you can have that. They can kind of like go through a bunch of topics and ideas, and I just thought it was like a really cool potential that they just kind of squandered.
Yeah, because they basically wanted to come up with the conclusion of you need human beings in order to make this work.
Yeah, and this is in 2016, so I know it's been a while, and I think they announced the project in 2015, so it's been about 5 years, but it was one of these things that it was almost like, reading signs or tarot card or horoscopes or something, because they're like, oh, we found this plot we really like they printed out all the plots, and then they like walked around and picked it, and it was like a wounded soldier makes a connection with
a wounded soldier must learn to communicate with a child in order to love or something
fall
like
in
that.
love or something like that. And so then they just said, well, this is the topic we like best. Like, they didn't even let the computer really pick it. They just said, computer generate these things and then human pick it.
Yeah.
And then they didn't even feed it back into the computer and say, computer, we like this one. Just remember, we like this one. They didn't do any of that. So anyway, they said, okay, this is our plot. And then they typed in all of the words into Google. And they said, what's the first search that came up? And I think it was these moms in England that did a protest against nuclear bomb housing site from the American.
Yeah.
It's basically the thing in Good Omens.
Yes.
It's that site in Good Omens where the Americans held the nuclear weapons, right? And so then anyway, they said, okay, so this story's about a mom and her mute child, and she falls in love with this American soldier. And so I said, wait. So your whole thing, a wounded soldier must learn how to communicate with a child. That's not even the main character. Neither one of those are the main character.
Yeah, which their justification for neither one of those being the main character was that, oh, well, the computer told us from the very beginning, even before it had a plot, that we needed to have a woman as our main character, which both of us were like, a woman can be a wounded soldier. A child can be a woman.
Or a wounded soldier. I mean, how many child soldiers have there been cases of in Africa and South Asia and Middle East?
And this is a thing that I said to Brady, but I feel very strongly about this, is that a lot of the things we see right now done with this sort of machine learning thing, where people try to go, oh, can a machine write a poem? Can a machine write a story? That sort of thing. I often see those things pulled out as, look how ridiculous and nonsensical what the machine produced is. And they even did a little bit of that with walking around looking at the plots, was they were like picking up plots and going, well, this is ridiculous. This doesn't make any sense, sort of thing. But I feel very strongly that what we're seeing right now from these machine learning systems is basically the first chapter of James Joyce's Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. That it's, once a Nison's baby taku, sort of, basically, is what it's giving us. And that is the first stages in learning to tell a story. When Joyce wrote that chapter, Joyce was reflecting the way that a child sort of develops an artistic sense and an ability to tell a story. And by not feeding information back into the system about, okay, but now what does this mean? What do you do with this? we're not allowing the development of the artist. We're basically we're mocking a 3-year-old child trying to tell us a story is what we're doing.
Yeah, like I guess I expected more of like, we're going to develop a Watson, but for the arts.
Yes.
Not for trivia, not for just general knowledge, and not that type of thing. But it's like, if we're looking at really trying to understand artificial intelligence or house intelligence and technology, then it's going to be very important for that to understand art, because we understand art. And it might be a really long distance, and we might not have the technology yet, and we might not even can consider what elements are going to create this thing.
Yeah.
But it was really frustrating. And I think that it was like, this guy kind of grew up on that commune of the Moms Against Nuclear Testing. And so I was like, I think you want to tell the story. Anyway, there's a lot of men making all these decisions. There was like, I think a female music director. But I was like, it just seemed like a lot of things are very cherry picked and could have gone one way or could have gone another way. But the guy was interpreting it like, oh, the computer knew. The computer picked it. I said, no, you're being very obtuse.
Yes. And there was one moment that really got my attention. I was actually in the other room making waffles, and I heard it on the television. I had to come in and be like, what did I just hear? Because it was, they were working on lyrics that had been developed by the computer. And the computer had created the line, "A new salvation." And they, in looking through it, they had been like, oh, well, we've had to add a few words here and there because the rhythm doesn't work right, or because the image sounds wrong. And they had changed it to "a new kind of salvation." And what was it? It was the
singer said, this doesn't feel right, singing "a new kind of salvation." Like, can I change it to "a new salvation"? And they said, well, that's what the computer generated, but it wasn't any good.
Yeah, and it was basically the singer trying to be like, no. Let's just listen to how it sounds when I sing it the way the computer came up with it, because it actually sounds better that way. And them really wanting to refuse to acknowledge the idea.
Well, it had to take like the music director and everything.
Yeah.
But like, there was a lot of like, even the one guy who was the composer was like, I'm anti-science, I don't like science, which we're just like, that's weird.
Yeah.
But it was just really a very strange project. I don't know the educational scientific validity. It just felt like this big marketing scheme. Just to get some attention, because I was like, I didn't know this composer, and we're just like, how much better would it have been to pick apart what makes a successful musical theater collaboration, like, Stephen Flaherty and Lynn Ahrens, or, Rodgers and Hammerstein, or the Gershwin brothers, like, what is the give and take? How do these things kind of work? And then could a person do it with a computer?
Yeah.
Like, utilizing the computer as the second composer, and it just was not that.
And it might be a process like that might be a long journey. It might be that enough people have worked independently that you already have the pieces. You just have to figure out how to connect them.
Well, I said, if I'm going back to get my music PhD, which is something I've talked about for a long time, I was like, this might be my project.
Yes. So, but anyway, that's one thing we watched, and then Bree had a much more satisfying artistic experience, I would say.
Well, I watched Live at Lincoln Center because there's now, just be honest, Live at Lincoln Center, please go subscribe on YouTube, go look them up. They keep everything up, which is really great. That's kind of the benefit of having public funding in an NPR type of setting, is nothing really goes away.
Yeah.
They don't really have to do, I mean, like, you should probably still give to Lincoln Center if you want to, but they don't have to do fundraising. They do have kind of like this public-private support, and so anything you want to watch that's ever been on Live in Lincoln Center is up on YouTube, which is pretty neat. I went to go find the Joe Iconis concert because I really want to watch that, but I also came across Carousel, and that was phenomenal. It was with Kelly O'Hara and Jesse Mueller and Nathan Gunn. It was from a while ago, but they've also done like really these great kind of symphonic concert series, so that's one of them. Another one I really loved was Sweeney Todd.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really good, with like Bryn Terfel and Audra McDonald. And so I highly, highly recommend go look up Live at Lincoln Center. It's still up there. You can check it out. I've also been kind of going back and forth with the National. which they are doing fundraising.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay to watch it, but they are limiting things because everything that the National has filmed, they have filmed to make money by showing it in movie theaters. But since we can't go to movie theaters, they've been releasing them for free for a week. It starts on Thursday, ends on Thursday. And I've seen, we talked about a lot of them here before. I think the last one I watched was Streetcar Named Desire with Gillian Anderson. But this most recent one was Amadeus, and it had this actor, Lucian Massimati, and he was phenomenal, and he was great. He was Salieri, and he's, I think, Mozambique and Tanzanian. He's created like theater companies in Africa, and he's only been in like 3 things in the whole world, which I was like so disappointed. I said we might have to watch The Great Ladies Detective Agency, which is on HBO Max apparently. So
to clarify, only 3 things like film or television.
Yeah, film or television.
He's done a lot of theater, but he hasn't done a lot of film and television.
Well, and I don't even know theater. I mean, I just looked up IMDb, so film and television. But he was really, really good. I really, really enjoyed that production. It makes me want to like go back and watch The Magic Flute, which is one of my favorite operas, and could be in one of it. And so, I mean, it's just one of these things like you really had such an amount of sympathy for his character, and he talks the whole show. I mean, like, he's just such a good performer. It was just so amazing. I mean, I still like the original movie as well. It's like the original movie kind of can't be beat in many respects, but I think it was kind of like a worthy production. And they had, I think it was like the South Side Southampton Symphony or something. I don't remember. I'm sorry. But they had them all on stage in plain blacks, and they had like Mozart in mostly like dress, but also had him in Doc Martens. And so they really kind of like mixed things up a little bit. And I said, as like somebody who is always making do with stuff, in regional theater, it was really kind of neat to see these choices being made where you could really see the people who are like a bit looser had some modern elements to their clothing, or the people who are like a bit more tighter and restrictive were very much like they were the fanciest dress you've ever seen your whole life. And I think I told Glenn, I said, I don't know how I feel about a show when I relate both to Mozart and Salieri at the same time. And he's like, I think that's just being an artist.
Yeah. I think every artist goes through, if you know the story of Amadeus, every artist initially begins as, I am Amadeus, I'm this wild, creative force. And then at some point, you're like, no, wait, I'm Salieri, being like, I've studied all of this time and dedicated my life to this, and why is that guy succeeding instead of me? And then eventually you come to the realization of like, I'm actually kind of both of those.
Yeah. So it was very, very good. Unfortunately, it went off the air on Thursday, but they have good stuff, so I would just say check them out. I think the one we watched together last was Midsummer, which we enjoyed a lot.
Which, what do they currently have? Do you know what they have currently?
Don't know what they have currently.
All right.
But I will also kind of just say, like, whatever it is, like, it's good. I just decided to go ahead and subscribe. So whenever, they kind of put something else new up, I want to be aware of that. I've also been watching a lot of David Tennant and Michael Sheen have been doing a little podcast or vlog or whatever, and that's been really fun.
Let's see.
So I don't know what's up next.
Yeah,
so hopefully let us know
what is up next. But
it's kind of something like one off, one on.
Yeah.
The Globe has stuff up for free. Like, Glen's just kind of checking on YouTube right now. Yeah. And sometimes they, like, cross-link.
It looks like, that's 6 months ago. So that's probably passed. But, yeah.
But there's, like, a lot of really amazing theater that's still going on online. I think everybody's really just having a hard time because while all these great things we can go ahead and go back and watch.
I think the National Theater is actually finishing up their run. Because what they've got up now from 2 days ago is, hey, remember these last 16 shows that we showed you?
Yeah. So what I was saying was the people who you see on these great performances are not getting paid. I think that that's a real issue that's existing in theater right now. So while we can all see things that have been recorded and that are up on the internet and are accessible, which I hope will kind of change the the environment for theater more
Mhm.
often is to always encourage accessibility and always to encourage kind of ease of access a bit more than I don't think that anybody who saw Hamilton on Disney Plus still wouldn't want to see Hamilton in person. I think
Right.
it probably like encourages them more so to do it. I don't think research has really been done on that, but I think that we would still want to see video productions of things and go see them live. I think we would like both of those things. I mean, I think as a kid who grew up on Sesame Street and then Sesame Street Live, yes, you do. You want to see them live. But for me, I think that I still have like a really great concern for the actors who are still out of work, losing their health insurance, losing their membership into unions, and really trying to struggle their way through stuff, because I think that we somewhat unfortunately assume that just because somebody was successful once, they are still doing well and still being successful, but that is not always the case, especially for the things I know that I've been watching of American actors and British actors.
Well, it's worth knowing that when you see Broadway actors on stage and you hear about, oh, this Broadway actor or that Broadway actor is really sort of the toast of Broadway, there's a reason why a lot of these actors would then show up in bit parts in TV shows like Law and Order and things like that. And it's not because, hey, they're a big famous actor and the network considered them a real get for those roles. It's because between shows, they're on unemployment. Mm-hmm. And finding weeks' work is very important in New York for unemployment. So they're actually going out there and being like, I'll be an extra on the set. I'll be, a bit player. I'll play 1 and 2 line roles. So when you have something like this going on with COVID-19, a lot of these people in theater are inclined to look at and go, that's the person who made it. They don't have the year or two of money just sitting in the bank.
Yeah, and I mean, they also aren't working TV or movies, which a lot of these folks cross back and forth between TV and Broadway. I've been kind of watching Javier Munoz, who was the original Hamilton and kind of main understudy for Lin-Manuel, and he's been kind of talking about, like, he's living in New York City his whole life. He's really concerned about how he's going to continue living there. He has a lot of medical bills that he pays for to keep his health in check and taken care of. Mm-hmm. And they're really thinking about, like, well, where do we move and where do we go and what do we do? Because he was one of the rare people who have had other people sign for his student loans who really believed in him, like his teachers, was able to go to a great school, was able to be in one of the most successful Broadway shows of all time. But, that's been 4 or 5 years out at this point. He does some TV work, but that's closed. So it's like, I think that everybody's kind of realizing how fast, even if you're a successful actor, that you're in peril. It's like, I think it's kind of like as all of us were during this pandemic, and there really doesn't seem to be a lot of easement in sight. We talked a lot about the HEROES Act is trying to get passed, but there's a lot of like really sneaky things going on. There's a lot of riders on this bill, and so I think that there's a lot of, this is just my interpretation, I don't know, I'm not on Capitol Hill, but I think it's going to get passed. But I think that there's still going to be a lot of these additional writers and additional issues and additional money that are going to get attached to it, and it's going to drag it out, and people are going to say, well, if you don't fund my pet project, I'm not going to give the American people money, and what are you going to say to your constituents? And I think it's going to be a big mess. But I hope that it gets passed soon, because I know a lot of people are really hurting for another stimulus check, since a lot of industries are just evaporated right now without seeing a future way forward.
Yeah, well, and people have basically been given, the way America has handled stimulus during the pandemic, people have basically been given $1,200 to live off of for 4 months.
Well, you know what? I've even been saying, like, let's just look at it, like, realistically. Mm-hmm. I was hired by my job in September, and I said, I will probably be in my job 6 months out of that first year, and 6 months out of my job in that first year. And I work in healthcare. I mean, that's what I think is, like, really kind of amazing, is people ask me all the time at work, well, have you met so-and-so? I'm like, no, I've been at home for a whole, almost half a year.
So it is a lot of crazy stuff going on, a lot of scary stuff going on, and it hopefully you're right that more relief will be coming to people who need it. Which I'll be perfectly blunt. My when I say people who need it, my sense is that the people who need it are not just us, everyone. Everyone needs it. And if that means that Jeff Bezos gets a check for $1,200 in the mail, you know what? Send him the check for $1,200 in the mail.
Well, the new act is only people making less than $45,000 a year.
Yeah.
Or under $75,000 a year,
Yeah.
sorry. And I think that's a lot of people there.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, honestly, I don't think that people making $75,000 a year are really in trouble. But,
Yeah.
you know.
But even the first round of stimulus was held up by this debate about, well, you don't want Elon Musk getting a check from the government. You don't want Jeff Bezos getting a check from the government. And it's like, if you send $1,200 to every American, and that includes Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, I have zero problem with them getting that check.
Well, and I think the big problem is, and then we'll get onto your pitch soon.
Yes.
We're just real fired up.
Yes.
Well, I think the real problem is people are already getting checks who are billionaires or who are large companies. And like, I just got an email from a local small business authority who just got money to give to other local small businesses in the amounts of $10,000 and $15,000. But I'm like, we've been stuck since March, and there's plenty of businesses that have already shut down and let go of all their employees. So now it's almost like lemon juice in the open wounds to say, like, well, now you can get $10,000 to stay afloat.
Yes. But anyway, that's that, and we got to this point in our conversation very naturally from a discussion of the arts and lack of arts funding and lack of arts opportunity because of COVID and things that are going on like that. But let's move on to our, I guess.
Yeah, let's give the people what they came to see.
Yes, let's move on to our main event, which is, I have an idea for a musical based on the life and music of Harry Nilsson.
Which I tried to get him to watch Russian Doll, which is also based on the music of Harry Nilsson.
Yes.
But he hasn't done it yet.
Yes, I will get to it eventually. I will get to it.
Doesn't want to cloud his mind.
Yeah. But, so, little bit of background on, not on Harry Nilsson, we'll get into that shortly. But on my idea for doing a show about Harry Nilsson, I started thinking about this when I was in graduate school, and I was looking for a subject to do a one-man show about. And I've always loved Harry Nilsson's music. My parents played Harry Nilsson's music for me when I was growing up. And one day I was, looking in the mirror, and I had long hair and a full beard. And I had this moment of looking at myself in the mirror and looking down at my iPhone that was playing the Nilsson, A Little Touch of Schmielson in the Night album. And there's Harry Nilsson on the cover in long hair and a beard. And I realized, I don't... Yeah, put me up on stage with this hair and a beard, and I could pass for Harry Nilsson. And I started being really enthusiastic about the project. Now, that project wound up not being done, because my thesis advisor at the time, when I brought him a pitch of, I want to do a show about Harry Nilsson, I want to work on my piano, I want to work on the songs, I want to start from the songs, select and rehearse the songs, and then build the show around that. His response was, I have no clue who you're talking about. And I was like, well, he's an important American songwriter. Lennon and McCartney thought he was the greatest American songwriter. Bob Dylan literally called him the greatest American songwriter. He wrote this song and this song and this song. And his response was like, yeah, but if I don't know who that is, nobody else is going to know who that is either, and you'll never be able to sell a ticket to it. So that show got shoved over to the side while I worked on a different show entirely. But because when you're in graduate school, you don't do prolonged arguments with your thesis advisor.
You graduate.
Yes, you graduate. So a lot of my thinking about how this show would work and everything is still based on the concepts I had for doing a one-man show based on the life of Nilsson. Although the more I think about it and the more I've played with the idea since we put it on the schedule in my head, the more I've been like, no, this will be a musical. It'll just be a small scale musical. It won't be a one-man show, but it might still borrow a lot of the structure you're used to seeing from a one-man show.
Yeah, and just to kind of like clarify, because like we did do some jukebox musical pitches.
Yeah.
We wanted to kind of envision smaller shows,
Yeah.
things that are one-person shows, maybe fringe, and it's not like these can't be big Broadway shows. Like What the Constitution Means to Me was a big Broadway show and it was a one-person show, but it is one of these things that I think that it's important to say. Maybe not everything's big and grand and showy. Yeah. Maybe something is small and intimate, and there's certainly places for shows on Broadway like that, but also fringe festivals. And one of the things that I think wherever we've lived, we've always wanted to start a fringe festival. We think there's a lot of room to encourage growth in music and art and writing, playwriting. We've never really stayed in one spot long enough to build connections or do stuff like that. Like we're like, I already set up like a Facebook group for like Blacksburg Fringe, and I think we're just kind of at the point where that seems feasible, especially because you do need to keep small groups after COVID. So we're trying to see if theater comes back, how can theater come back? And that's why we kind of wanted to pitch smaller shows. And that's what this falls under. Yeah,
and this I guess we would have explained all of that transition into this theme on Wednesday because that was supposed to be our first of this theme. But yeah, basically the theme that we're going with for our next few pitches is fringe shows. Things that you could put together a small cast or a one-person show and take them to a fringe festival and do the show. So I'm envisioning my Harry Nilsson musical as a small cast musical that I think works really well with the fringe format because we've seen a lot of musicals about a musician lately. Things like The Cher Show.
Well, I'm just thinking like kind of a contemporary piece is Beautiful.
Yeah.
Carole King.
Well, what I was thinking about, though, was a lot of the shows like The Cher Show really base their look for their show on what does a Cher concert look like. And the fascinating thing about Harry Nilsson for taking him to a fringe venue is that Harry Nilsson really didn't do that much live performance. He always saw himself as a songwriter first and did not really consider himself to be a touring musician. So there was no huge Harry Nilsson world tour. There was no Harry Nilsson plays the Hollywood Bowl. When he did play live, he tended to play smaller venues. He tended to be like, oh, there's a piano bar. I'll show up at the piano bar and play a song or two or something like that. But I think that makes him very well suited for a fringe venue because fringe venues tend to be small and intimate. And putting that life on stage in that kind of small, intimate venue when his life is simultaneously huge in terms of the number of people he knew and the things he was involved in, and very small because he was a very private person who wasn't big on the party scene, wasn't big on anything like that. He was more about having a few friends and spending time with his friends. I think could make for a very fascinating show. So, really quickly, let's get into the life of Harry Nilsson and how I think this would be reflected in the show. Harry Nilsson was an aspiring singer-songwriter for much of his young life. This was the time in Nashville when it was not uncommon for songwriters to go and be like, oh, I've got a new song. And they would literally like flog the song door to door in the office buildings in Nashville. So a lot like Carole King talks about this as well, where it's like start at the top floor of the office building and knock on every door and work your way down and see if you can sell somebody your song. From Bristol we've got Harry Nilsson first heard of Harry Nilsson when he wrote and performed the theme song for Midnight Cowboy, which was a huge hit for him.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Everybody's Talking.
Well, when you posted River Deep Mountain High, well, that's in the Tina Turner musical.
Yeah.
So he's making some royalties.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, although River Deep Mountain High was not one of his compositions. It was a cover that he did.
There you go.
But what he did do was he did that song, One is the Loneliest Number, which has been in countless movie soundtracks.
And isn't Let Me Tell You About My Best Friend?
Did that one, yes.
Which is my favorite thing to sing to Lola.
the lime and the coconut that Coke used for a jingle when they came out with their lime version. Yeah, his music is everywhere.
It's ubiquitous.
Yes. So he was sort of a struggling singer-songwriter in Nashville. And like a lot of artists, he took a day job in order to be able to make ends meet. He worked in a bank. And he actually worked, like, behind a desk in an office at the bank. So he was, like, going over loan applications and things like that. And then playing small clubs at night, making connections with musicians and trying to get them interested in his music. There was one instance in particular where another songwriter was like, hey, nobody's listening to my songs when I try to play them for them, but you have a really good voice and you play piano really well. Can I just pay you like $100 and you record 6 of my songs, and then I'll use your demo to sell my songs? And Nilsson did that. I bring that up because I love the story. He came back later after Nilsson was like top of the pop charts and asked Harry Nilsson how much money he would want to give him the rights to release those 6 tracks as like their own album. Because he's like, I can cash in. I've got Harry Nilsson before he was Nilsson, and I just, how much of that do you want for me to release that? And Harry Nilsson was like, you paid me $100 to record it. Mm-hmm. He's like, you've already paid for it. Just go ahead and release it. And he even went into the studio and recorded a little voice piece that was like him leaving a message on the guy's phone being like, yeah, sure, $100. That's worth it for 6 songs. But anyway, so he's flogging songs as much as he can. And finally he gets a contract with RCA Records. And when RCA Records was going over, their standard agreement and everything like that, he looked at his agreement and he said, this is all good. And yeah, I understand this is what you give everybody who works for you, but I'm going to miss my office at the bank. Do you think in addition to all of this stuff you're giving me, you could just find me a little space in the building somewhere that I can have an office with a desk and a piano? And RCA was like, sure, yeah, we can do that. And they basically gave him a space not much larger than a closet that had a desk and a piano in it. And he would go in and spend an 8-hour day working in the RCA Records building in his office writing songs. Which he was the only artist signed with RCA at the time who had an office in the RCA Records building. So I sort of see the first act of this show having as its primary set the office with the piano and the desk.
I love it.
Right. So that is where we're hearing his story. Another thing he got in his contract that nobody else necessarily got was he had refusal rights on best of compilations. So if they decided they wanted to release a best of Harry Nilsson album, he could basically say to them, no, I don't like that, that's a bad idea, and they couldn't release it. He was working on songs. A few of his songs got picked up by other artists. And he recorded his first album, Pandemonium Shadow Show, which is named after the carnival from Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes. And he said he wrote this album, recorded it, released it, nobody paid attention to it. It sank on the charts. Nobody really picked it up and noticed it. one single he released went to number 4 on the pop charts in Canada, but didn't get any traction on American radio. But it had the effect of turning him into the songwriter's songwriter. Because anybody who was in the industry who heard one of his songs on the radio was suddenly like, this guy is amazing. So much so that one guy who had a lot of connections in the industry bought an entire case of copies of the album so that he could give them as gifts to all of his friends in the industry, which included the Beatles. And the Beatles, then, the story is John Lennon got the album, put it on, listened to it, expecting to, like, listen to a track or two, and then be like, put it on, and wound up listening to it all the way through, and then going back to side A and starting it over again. And listened to it for 36 hours straight. And then picked up the phone and called international long distance to Harry Nilsson's office at the RCA Records Records building, just to be like, hey, I listened to your album. Congratulations, that's a really great album. And then the next day he got another phone call that was from Paul McCartney, where Paul McCartney was saying, hey, John Lennon gave me your album and said that I had to listen to it. You do some really great work. So there he is, really enjoying sort of like industry recognition, if not public recognition. Mm-hmm. But then the Beatles gave an interview to American media. And when asked, who do you think is good in American pop music? John Lennon said, Nilsson. And they said, really, who's your favorite American artist? And Paul McCartney says, Nilsson. Mm-hmm. And they said, who's your favorite American songwriter? And John Lennon says, Nilsson is great at everything. Nilsson for president. And overnight, Nilsson's popularity skyrocketed. Because suddenly everybody's like, who the hell is Nilsson? The Beatles love his music. Who is this guy? So he's sitting in his office. The phone rings. He picks up the phone, and it's a reporter from Life magazine. And they're like, are you Nilsson? And he says, yes, I'm Nilsson. And they say, okay, where do you enjoy playing live? I don't play live shows. Where was the last place you played live? I don't play live shows. Where are you going to play live next? I don't play live shows. Okay, thank you very much. And they hung up on him. And then it showed up in like a sidebar in Life magazine on an article about the Beatles about their favorite artist is the enigmatic and mysterious Harry Nilsson, who was very coy with our reporter. You know? So I love this idea of all of these, like, the first act being the story of all of these sort of like struggle, rise up, and get to this popularity, this sudden popularity. And where I would put this chronologically is I'm thinking the storytelling bit, the sort of frame story for the first act, is Nilsson's third album was supposed to be a best of album. Because the label was like, your first 2 albums didn't sell, but now the Beatles are into you. So everybody's into you. Let's just throw together some tracks and like run it out the door. And Nilsson instead took over the project, and what he produced was the Pandemonium Aerial Ballet, which was tracks from the first 2 albums, Pandemonium Shadow Show and Aerial Ballet, combined into a single album. But he didn't just grab the versions that had been mastered for those albums. He went back and he remixed alternate takes, different versions of the songs, kind of spliced together new versions, and created an entirely new album out of previously existing material. And then released that. And that is considered today to be the first ever remix album released. Because that sort of thing was unheard of. All you did, if you had a compilation, was grab the things you had already released, put them out there. So I like the idea of Nilsson sitting in his office working on the track list for these things and playing some of the songs that from those first 2 albums, playing some of the songs from coming up through the clubs, and coming up through the songwriting and things like that, while telling these stories. And as you tell these stories, scenes shift, and you have the memories walk in and out, and you have someone playing John Lennon, you have somebody playing Paul McCartney, you have the RCA executive who signed him, who was like, you want an office? Sure, I guess we'll give you an office, sort of thing. And then the culmination of the I guess, end of the first act, I would want to end it with a song that I have always loved, that Harry Nilsson wrote. And that was always the song that music reporters would ask him about, and he never explained the meaning of it. And it's a song called Good Old Desk, which is basically, he wrote a very tender, loving love song to a desk. And it's a literal desk. It's not, the desk is a symbol for anything like that. And he always had fun trying to like convince the reporters that there was some deeper meaning to the desk. But he was constantly contradicting what he had told other reporters and things like that. And I grew up listening to that song. I loved that song. I think it's a great song. I always thought it was kind of nonsensical. And then I heard the story about, I'm gonna miss my office. Can you give me an office with a piano and a desk? And I was like, oh, Harry Nilsson just really loved working at a desk. And I feel like that could be a really nice sort of ending to the first act.
Maybe not working at the bank, but being that bank desk.
Yeah.
When you find a perfect desk, you find a perfect desk.
Yes. And I go a little bit back and forth on this, because I feel like you could put that ending at that moment of Pandemonium Aerial Ballet. And that's where I feel it the strongest. I also feel like you could shove it a bit forward in time to when he was leaving RCA Records. But basically, I'm giving like the broad strokes of his career here and everything. After the Beatles mentioned his name, he became an overnight success, insanely popular, and he had a series of best-selling albums for RCA Records, which are the Schmielsen albums. Starting off with Nilsson Schmielsen, then Son of Schmielsen, Little Touch of Schmielsen in the Night, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And he had number one hits. There was Jump Into the Fire, became a huge hit for him. Coconut was a hit. Put the lime in the coconut and drink both up. He had 1941, which 1941 was the song that apparently caught John Lennon's attention when he listened to the album. That he thought, oh, this is a phenomenal thing. That became a hit on re-release after the Beatles had mentioned his name. So you have this skyrocketing popularity, and then things started to go a little bit off the rails, because Nilsson had a bit of an acerbic sense of humor, and a little bit of a streak of don't tell me what to do. So Nilsson and John Lennon became great friends. They hung out a lot together. Lennon went through an 18-month period that is referred to as the Lost Weekend, which is sort of hilarious, that it's a lost weekend that's 18 months long. But basically it's the Lost Weekend because he spent almost the entire period either drunk or high. And it was a period when he was separated from Yoko Ono. And he spent a significant chunk of that time in LA with Harry Nilsson. And they were working together on an album that Nilsson was writing the album and John Lennon was producing the album. And this became Harry Nilsson's Pussycats. During that time period, one very famous story about them, they got drunk together while they were out one night and they started heckling the Smothers Brothers at the Troubadour. And this ended with them being like physically ejected from the Troubadour by the bouncers and told never to come back. Which it takes a lot to really screw up enough that the bouncers at a folk club are forced to remove you. Um, Tommy Smothers always said, no, we didn't have any problem with it. You know, they were like, it was John and Harry. They were drunk and having a good time. But that was sort of an infamous thing that got into a lot of magazines at the time. And the other thing that happened during this period is, while recording a song for Pussycats, Harry Nilsson ruptured one of his vocal cords, which that weakens your voice. Nilsson had a very distinct voice and a very powerful voice that had a good high range, a good falsetto, very solid on the notes. He damaged his voice and then made it worse because he was worried that if he told John Lennon, oh, I've ruptured my vocal cord, John Lennon would insist on stopping the project while he recovered. And then he was like, John's a great guy, but his attention wanders. So if we stop this so I can recover, John's going to wander off and lose interest in the album, and the album is shot. So he hid the information that he had damaged his voice. But when the album came out, one of the things the critics said was, this doesn't sound like Nilsson. This sounds weaker than him. What's going on with him? And his next couple of albums with RCA after that, he still was recovering from the ruptured vocal cord. So they didn't sell as well, and RCA wound up dumping him from his contract. After RCA dumped him from his contract, Nilsson moved for a little while to London. And while living in a flat in London, he had a lot of fun because all of his friends in the music industry would stop by, and when they were playing in London, they would live at his apartment while they were there. So he had a great, in and out. Unfortunately, this wound up having a darker side because when Mama Cass passed away, she passed away in Harry Nilsson's apartment where she was staying at the time. So one of his really good friends in the music industry passed away in his apartment. And then just about a month after Mama Cass passed away in his apartment, Keith Moon, the drummer for The Who, died of a drug overdose in Harry Nilsson's apartment because he was staying with his friend Harry Nilsson. So Harry Nilsson, in very quick succession, not only was losing a lot of friends in the industry to drug overdoses and things like that, but some of them were actually passing away right in his apartment, right there in front of him. Which made him start thinking, maybe I should pull back a bit. And he closed down his apartment in London, moved back to LA, and said, I'm going to be less of a performer, less of a songwriter. He went into a period basically of semi-retirement, where he said, if someone comes to me and they want a song for something, I will write them a song. But for now, what I've written is what's going to support me, and I'm not going to trouble myself with, I've got to get the next thing out the door. He had one album that he recorded that was supposed to be a comeback album. Unfortunately, his album, about a month before it was supposed to release, Elvis Presley died. And of course, when a musician dies, the record label goes nuts trying to get their back catalog out in order to cash in off of the sudden interest in them from their passing. The record label cleared its entire slate to focus on nothing but Elvis Presley reissues. So Nilsson's comeback album that the label had been really excited to push got cleared to make way for Elvis reissues. Didn't get released until a year later, and then it was released with the record label basically treating it as, we're obligated to release this. So there's Nilsson, lost a lot of friends, lost his comeback album. He starts composing music specifically for television and film. He composed Robert Altman's Popeye, the music for Robert Altman's Popeye, which was not a box office success. But if you haven't listened to that album in a long time, that's a really great album. It's got a great soundtrack. He composed theme songs for television shows, including, I posted this on Twitter yesterday, the theme song for John Candy's cartoon, Camp Candy, is a Harry Nilsson composition. He kept his hand sort of in what he was doing. In 1980, he had a burst of probably the most public he would be in a very long while because of the assassination of John Lennon. John Lennon, they said the effect on Harry Nilsson when John Lennon was killed was huge. On the one hand, they said it kind of hurt his musical output, and people have said that probably deepened his sort of semi-retirement. Because it, according to friends and family of Harry Nilsson, his response when they were like, why haven't you written anything for this, is he's like, it's just hard to sit down and write a song when I know I can't pick up the phone and play it for John. And the other thing was he became an activist for the campaign to end handgun violence. And you can find still on YouTube the PSAs he recorded for things, which this was a guy who had avoided a lot of public appearances and things like that. But this cause really got him out and got him talking to people and testifying before the Senate and trying to really do something good out of all this.
Well, I think it shows how important John Lennon was in his life, because he did not go up for dare. He didn't talk about let's end drugs, but his one friend gets shot with a handgun, and he was really passionate about abolishing that.
Well, yeah.
And maybe it was because it was personal choice with the drugs. I don't know, but I was like, it just goes to show how influential John Lennon was in his life as a friend and a collaborator.
Mm-hmm. And now, so these stories, I feel, would be the stories of the second act, which fits well with the structure for a show that the heavier, more dramatic stories come in the second act. I would be focusing a lot more on the music that came after his initial stint with RCA for the songs for this. And then the frame story, to put it all in context. Harry Nilsson passed away in, I believe it was 1993, maybe early 1994. And he passed away because he had a congenital heart defect, which was not a thing that was a shock to his family or anything. It was something that had been known about since he was a child. But he passed very suddenly, and he passed in the middle of working with RCA Records again, both on a new album and a box set of all of his favorite tracks from when he was recording with them. So again, I see this as the structure for the second act. You change the set a bit, that it's no longer the office in the RCA building, but it is his home. And it's his music room with his grand piano and a writing desk. And it's him working on the new songs, working on the track list for the box set, things like that. So you've got him in a similar situation to what he was in Act 1, in terms of the actual work he's doing. But you get to hear the stories about hanging out with John Lennon, hanging out with Mama Cass, what it was, how devastating it was when these friends started disappearing, started passing away. You get to see a little bit of the activism of the campaign to end handgun violence and the focusing on work for hire. But you also get to hear a bit of the music that he was working on at the time. He had demos for, I would love to put one of these at least into the show. He was working on a Broadway show that was going to be a musical based on the life of Pancho Villa. And I would love to put at least one of the songs from his musical based on the life of Pancho Villa into the musical based on the life of Harry Nilsson.
Well, what I think is kind of the most complicated thing about what you've just pitched is this sounds like if I saw this in a movie, I'd be like, oh man, that's kind of like, that thing you do. Like, I mean, there's just like a lot of, I think, movies about the rise and fall of musicians that are very, very popular, but aren't necessarily musicals.
Yeah.
And I also know that, like, when you deal with maybe a jukebox musical or a musical about somebody's life, you really want these punchy musical numbers. And I know, like, that's kind of why it's a bit more fit for a Fringe versus, like, maybe a big show. But I was like, I think you're going to have a hard time while the story is interesting and riveting and I think could definitely fill up an hour and a half to 2 hours worth of space. When are these emotional moments in his life going to be paired with a song that's going to be entertaining? Because, like, that's why when you said, like, about, like, My Desk, I totally get it as an end of an act one, or even like kind of pretty early on in Act One when he leaves his job at the bank.
Yeah.
Because, like, you always want something at the end that's triumphant, that people are tapping their toes, they're going out and they want to buy that soundtrack when they get home. Yeah.
And you need something like that for the end of Act 2 as well.
Oh, no, definitely for Act 2. I mean, usually, like, Act 2s are mega mixes, right?
Right.
Like the Harry Nilsson mega mix, so that we're all like, yeah, go put that on and drive home.
And this is where I talked about, like, I have a little bit of difficulty deciding where exactly I want to put the split for Act 1. Is that, like I say, my primary impulse is put it there at, like, the real sort of, like, peak of what's going on. But then there's part of me that also wants it to be right after the release of Pussycats. So what you're seeing is him with the damage done to his vocal cords, which he did ultimately recover from. But it, like I said, it affected him for a good 2 albums or so.
That's a lot to ask an actor to do 8 times a week. They better make sure that they got good physical therapy so they don't damage their vocal cords.
Yes. But putting him sort of at that position where it gets a lot more dramatic after that point, but he could talk a little bit about things like the John Lennon and the Troubadour story, sort of that sort of thing, and still end it with Good Old Desk. Although, like you said, for that to be a number of him leaving the bank, you could put that as a number of him leaving RCA Records. All of this right happened at the bank desk and at this desk. And here's the song, Good Old Desk.
And he's in heaven at a desk.
Well, I mean, for the second act, that could be a thing, is that it turns out the whole thing has been in heaven this whole time. Like he's been telling this story from beyond. It's difficult for me to know exactly what musical number I would want to go with for a finale. I don't think it's appropriate to use Jump Into the Fire.
Well,
but go ahead.
I just wonder, based on kind of how all this is like progressing, like, if I don't really want to do a biopic, like how much of taking kind of like the myth, the man, all that type of stuff. Yeah. Like, I don't like being in front of an audience. Maybe it's kind of interesting to do maybe like a Hamlet, a story within a story. Yeah. Like, I don't feel all that comfortable telling the story of my own life, but I'm going to have, these folks here tell it for me, and kind of being like the grand architect type of thing. That would be an interesting thing. Well, like you said, the second act being a mega mix. Well, it's not. So the second act is not really a mega mix, but the like, you just think of the finales in these types of things. Like, Jersey Boys, everybody gets up and sings. Mamma Mia, everybody gets up and sings. Like, you want people to be on their feet and singing and having this kind of joyous, rapturous, gospel type of experience and celebration of somebody's life. You don't want to have like a quiet number. So what I was about to say is your final number can be all of the songs where people have been sitting there the whole time going, when are they going to play the hits that we really like? Like, you have Three Dog Night on there singing One Is the Loneliest Number. You go from that into another hit song that was covered by somebody else, another Or yeah, I mean that's the appropriate time to bring up the lime and the coconut song, you know, because everybody's gonna want to sing that and dance their way out.
Or you have John Candy come out as a character and do the theme song to Camp Candy.
Well, and you know what? You're like, this has become a very big cast for somebody that's like, I want to do this as a one-man show, because it's like, and also very like specific body type cast.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how you're gonna find this cast and then have them roll into just like people, because there's no concerts.
Yes.
There's like streets. Like, let alone just finding a body type for a Mama Cass and a John Candy. That never happens on Broadway.
You know, you'd be bringing a different kind of diversity to the Broadway stage. Why not?
It's like, you probably have to just find one person and be like, you've got to be Mama Cass and John Candy. Yeah.
I know that was a joke, but that hurt my soul just a little bit thinking about that.
Well, we know how entertainment works.
Yes. But, so the idea needs some work.
Yeah.
But then again...
But it's a good idea.
And that is what a fringe show really is useful for.
Yep.
Is taking these things out and workshopping them in front of the real audiences and saying to the audiences, you know, what worked for you? What didn't work for you? And sort of getting a notion of how we're going to build this thing in.
Well, very cool. If you do want to check out more things about Harry Nilsson, definitely check out Glen's Twitter handle right here. He's been posting about him for the past 2 or 3 days. If you think this is a good idea, if you don't think it's a good idea, if you want to kind of mention maybe somebody else, your favorite artist that you'd love to see a kind of biopic jukebox musical about, you can feel free to tweet at us. You can feel free to comment on this video. But it's been so good to see you guys, and we really appreciate y'all being here. And we're going to kind of continue this. I'm not going to pick up what we missed on Wednesday just because we got to keep moving forward. Maybe one of these days I'll pick it back up. But to be honest, it was not that great of an idea.
Yeah.
So I don't think you missed all that much.
I think it's a great idea, but, you know, she's the one pitching it, so.
Okay. Goodbye. We love you.
We love you guys. And tune in on Wednesday. That's when our next one is. And we love you. Take care of yourselves because we're not there to take care of you.
Wear your mask. Wash your hands.
Yes. Bye.